Yeah, so right now we're at 1.
You sure?
All right, I'll call a meeting to order. Briefly, I'm masking up this evening because I was sick about 4 weeks ago with COVID and I didn't know it. And I'm here to protect you in case I got it again. So I don't think I have, but this BA.5 variant is wickedly contagious and it's all over the place. So this is a precaution mostly for you and my sanity. So the meeting is being viewed and broadcast through EOI Live TV and also on our Facebook page. And there are no members of the council who are participating virtually. Everyone that is going to participate this evening is here at the dais. Could I do a roll call, please?
Steve Clemens.
Here.
Gary Lillard is absent excused. John Bozarth.
Here.
David Glabe.
Here.
Nicole Howard is absent excused. Marianne Meisner.
Here.
Justin Rock.
Here.
Lauren Babcock. Here. Elena Carollo. Here. Ricky Joe Hickey. Here. Matt Scarfo.
Here.
Roxy Ogilvy. Here.
And for people that may be watching, this is a special session. It's a joint meeting of the Urban Renewal Agency and the Urban Renewal Advisory Commission. And the last 5 names you heard during the roll call are members of the URAC. Thank you all for participating. This was it's long overdue that we've been able to see each other, and this is quite the document that we have to go through this evening. Staff has done a great job at kind of keeping things concise. I really appreciate the staff reports. Gives me a starting place to look at each project. And then the support material is always very good to get through and understand what people are asking the money for and the projects that we may be looking at.
If I could just real quick,
Yes.
for the members of the URAC, if you haven't put your microphone on, please do.
Oh,
And one point on this, if you put your hand across it and turn to the person next to you to talk, everybody at home gets to hear too. So
the mic is very sensitive. So we have a special session. Sole purpose is to look at funding for the Call for Projects program. There will be no public comments for non-agenda items this evening. We're going to go right into the new business. And that new business is a review of 6 calls, project for Call for projects. Okay. And do we need anybody to declare a conflict of interest?
yeah, I had 2 people that reached out, and one of them is Counselor Lillard, who has a perceived conflict, so he's not participated.
Okay.
The other one was not a conflict at all.
Okay.
So unless someone else has a financial interest in any of the projects, then we're good to go.
Okay, very good. With that, I'll turn it over to our Economic Development Coordinator, Director, Timothy Bishop, and looks like we're going to take the project summary in alphabetical order. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Give us an idea what we, other than having individually read through the projects, what's the format for this evening? Give us an idea what we're going to do in general and then head into it.
Well,
Oh, there it is.
we're going to tell you about it right here. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the agency, members of the URAC. So today we are going to give you a brief staff report on each of the projects. I promise not to go through this document page by page. I trust that you've all read it. I'll give you some highlights and try to answer any questions that you still might have. You'll have a agency and URAC will have that discussion on the projects until you feel like you have enough information. At which point we'll take a break. During that break, each member of the URAC and the agency will individually be able to award and up to an additional 40 points discretionary to each project. So as you're going through the projects, if you have questions, when you're done, you can add up to 40 points to each project during the scoring during the break. Once you've done that, if you will provide those those additional scores to our agency manager, he will then tabulate those during the break. Once that's been done, agency and URAC will reconvene after the break, review the final scoring results and rankings, and then end the evening by voting on projects funding by project location. Any questions on this evening's process?
Just one thing real quick, Mayor, there is in your packet, or in the agency, there is a council action form that kind of walks, agency action form that kind of walks.
Okay, so after we get done with this, we'll do some voting. Is that correct?
Yeah, so, and again, once we get through the presentation, just kind of turn to that action form.
Okay.
Follow that form, that would be great.
All right, Timothy, I think you're good to go.
Okay, so the next thing we'll do is just a really quick review of the process timeline for anybody watching and for a couple of our new URAC committee members. So Call for Projects actually opened on March 14th of this year. Applications were required to be submitted by May 27th. We did receive 6 applications. We actually did receive 1 additional application, but we're unable to secure a complete application. So that application was withdrawn. Staff evaluations and scoring have taken place. Packets were made available to the agency and URAC beginning June 29th of this year. So you've had about 2 weeks to review those along with staff reports and our draft initial scoring from staff. And then the agency, URAC individuals had the opportunity to submit their initial score to the city. Those were due. I think we received the last of those today, so we do have all of those. So again, tonight, you'll have a chance to review the applications a little farther. Again, you'll have the opportunity to add an additional 40 points at your discretion per each application. And then of course, to the opportunity to vote and award funding for those projects tonight. So with that, we'll go ahead and start with one of our first projects. And again, we will go through these alphabetically. So this is the Boning Camp building. Some of you know this as the Mountain Works Bicycle Shop building located at 1301 Adams Avenue. This is a substantial project. Total project cost is $784,000. They're requesting $75,000 in funding through Urban Renewal call for projects, and that is the maximum eligible amount of funds for this project. The project is predominantly exterior restoration, including windows, awning, that marquee style awning in the front of the building, but also includes significant seismic upgrades, some code upgrades, including wiring, some fire life safety updates, and then the creation of 3 residential units on the 2nd floor of this building. So quick project highlights. The renovation includes the seismic code compliance. It also meets several goals in the urban renewal plan, including revitalizing downtown. By revitalizing this commercial property, it creates 1 additional job, since there will be a property manager hired once the residential units come online. And then it also, so it creates that housing component with 3 additional units. So other than the 1 new job, it doesn't create additional retail jobs, but it is retail retention within the district. So if it's okay with the agency and the commissioners, I'd like to go ahead and just go through and do a quick summary, and then we'll come back and answer specific questions on each one, if that's okay. Okay, so moving along, we have the Country Financial Building. This is a building that you've seen a fair amount of work on over the years. This is the last phase of several phases of work. It is the final residential unit being developed on this property. Total project cost is $76,496. The funding request is $38,248. Of that, there are some expenses that are not eligible expenses. So the maximum eligible grant that's available is $33,508. This is a residential only project. Some of you remember earlier this month, we had to amend our scoring sheet to include a ranking for a project that just included a residential only project. This was one of those that necessitated that need. So this is 1 of 2 apartments on the 2nd floor. Previous unit has already been completed. So for this application, we are only looking at the 1 unit in the application. You'll see it referred to as Unit B. This project does include a little bit of exterior work as well. There is some exterior paint and masonry repair that's involved. The project does address goal 1 and 4 of the urban renewal plan, revitalizing downtown by renovating the 2nd floor of a downtown building. And in fact, this project will bring this property to 100% occupancy, ground and second floor. And then, of course, it meets goal 4 with the residential housing addition as well. This next project is another exciting project. This is another large project. This is the Evermind building. Some of you may know this as the Meridell Center, was purchased last year. The Evermind company, which is a company out of Portland, which does custom labels, is the owner. They are renovating the space to house the relocation of their Portland-based company. So this project is $184,605. $75,000 is the maximum, is the funding request, and is also the maximum amount due or amount eligible. This particular project renovates predominantly that single level 1960s edition, one-story addition on the north side of the building to house the Evermind Label Company's production space. The renovation of the entire mid-century addition is for that purpose. The project includes significant code compliance, new HVAC, includes a loading dock, creation of both production and design and administrative spaces, and will also include a small retail coffee shop space in the front, in the front corner next to the Washington Street entrance. This project addresses goals 1, 2, and 3 of the urban renewal plan. Goal 1, by revitalizing downtown, renovating a major portion of the former Elks building for new use, creates high quality family wage jobs. And then it also redevelops and activates the Washington Street frontage of this particular space. So moving on, our next building is Front Office Solutions. As some of you may know, the Kettle, Corn, and More space. This particular project is relatively small in terms of footprint. It's $131,312 budget. 65,656 is the budget request. And that is also the maximum eligible fund for this project. This project includes replacing the roof and facade improvements to the building, as well as removal and replacement of the awning that you saw in that first photo. So some of this is roof repair and structural. And in fact, this project really was sort of initiated because of a roof failure. And so we were able to work with them to move forward and take advantage of that opportunity to look at this grant program. So the plan also is to remove and replace the awning, as well as that lava stone facade, and replace that with a more period appropriate brick storefront and facade. The project addresses goal 1 of the urban renewal plan, which is to revitalize downtown by renovating this very visible commercial property, making it a more period appropriate to the district. And while it does not create new jobs, it does facilitate the retention of an existing commercial business and those jobs. We also, next on here, we have the Smokehouse Restaurant located on South Adams, 2208 Adams Avenue. This particular project is $141,098 budget. The funding request is $70,549. That is also the maximum eligible fund. This particular project is really some deferred maintenance, as well as structural and aesthetic improvements to the smokehouse. Those highlights include repaving the parking lot, repair and replacement of kind of a hard awning, replace the existing exterior lighting, new HVAC, ADA compliant restrooms, and more energy efficient windows. So significant upgrade to this restaurant. The project in my opinion, does address goal one of revitalizing downtown. While the building is not located downtown, it is in the urban renewal district. It's on that Adams Avenue entry corridor. It's an important sort of visible entry into the downtown. And as a restaurant, locally owned restaurant, does really continue to support those efforts to support local owned food and beverage. There is also an indication in the application of potential job growth. In my opinion, while that is a benefit that we should consider, I'm not sure that the pay scale meets the criteria of goal two. So we should count it as a benefit. I'm not sure that it meets the criteria for that goal. The local kitchen is our final project. This is for clarity. This is a new project that is intended to support the expansion of another business. This is a $204,350 project, of which the funding request is $75,000. There are some project aspects that are not eligible funds. So the maximum eligible grant would be $64,180. In essence, this project converts one bay of the warehouse pictured in the previous slide into a commercial kitchen, what would be known as a ghost kitchen, with walk-in freezer and storage and production facility to serve as the commercial kitchen for the local coffee shop, particularly to serve as a production facility for ice cream and other products that would be served out of that restaurant. The project specifically includes new electrical, HVAC, and plumbing to support those new uses, installation of a permanent walk-in freezer, new windows, and garage door for that space. As noted, there are some components of this that are not eligible. Some of the interior cabinetry, stove, those tenant improvements would not be eligible, but those are broken down in the application and in the report. If you have questions, I can answer more of those. This project does address goal 1 and 2, revitalizing downtown by repurposing this space to support the expansion and growth of an existing downtown business. And it does create 3 family wage jobs, and those are identified specifically in the application. So with that, I think that's a really quick, succinct overview. I am happy to answer any specific questions I can, comments from the agency.
Go ahead, John.
What's a family wage job?
So family wage job is defined, and I don't have that written down in here, but I should. We defined that based on the work source average wage, all sectors for Baker County, which I believe is just over $20 per hour. And I can certainly look that up and get you that final number.
He's not showing that in this here as family wage job then, and you just said they were.
So in the guidelines, we don't define family wage, we define high paying jobs. So I assume that was in that range. If I'm incorrect, you can certainly define what that wage would should be.
Well, he mentioned 30,000 a year, which is roughly $15 an hour.
Okay, so
So
that would not be high paying then.
So that's not a family wage job.
That would be an error on my part, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So let's to kind of keep this straight and that we're all on the same relative page, because there's a lot of them. Let's start with the Bone and Camp. Let's go back to the beginning with the Bone and Camp building project. RAC members, any questions? Agency members, any questions about the Bone and Camp project? The only question I had in looking through the material, and I think you answered it, and that was they had submitted a request for $200,000 from Main Street Program. And
Correct.
Was that fully awarded?
Yes.
Okay,
So yes, this project did receive the $200,000 Main Street revitalization grant from the Oregon Parks Department through Main Street. Yes.
Timothy, I think it mentioned something, then the balance of that was in the form of a loan, if I'm thinking about the right one here on the page. And if that's true, oh yeah, right. A loan of $419,000. Has that been approved, or do you know, or?
Yes, the applicant did submit a letter from financial institution indicating that she had access to that. So there is document that she has
Thank you.
access to those funds.
Amanda, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was, that's really loud. Just to kind of follow up on what the mayor was asking, I was curious about the brownfield funding. Has that been awarded, or what's the timeline on that funding?
That has not been awarded. That is in process. She has met with the consultant, and we are moving forward with the phase one, but that's not been finalized with any contract yet. So in process.
any other questions on this project?
Sorry, one more question. With
Sure,
the brownfield funding, would that go towards either like the EPA testing or hazard removal? Do you know, or what's kind of the specific use?
I cannot answer that yet.
Okay,
The first piece of that would be a phase one, which is really the documentation.
Okay.
And then we have prioritized that project as a potential phase two project, which would be an additional application. And if approved, that would then go towards the testing and remediation. But again, that is a process that is in progress, but has not been completed yet.
thank you so much.
Timothy, did you say yes or no to the fact that Landmarks has approved this project?
Project has not been before Landmarks yet. It will have to go through Landmarks for approval as part of the process.
So if we approve this, it'll still be hinging on what Landmark says and going through all those steps.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And because this project also received the Main Street revitalization grant, it will also have to adhere as a condition of that to the Secretary of Interior standards.
Okay.
So those will be part of the review process for this project.
So I'm assuming then that the estimates for the project at this point include the elements to meet the landmarks and the Main Street grant requirements.
Correct.
Okay. I wouldn't want anything surprising them as they got into this and find out that, oh, well, it's going to cost you another $150,000. That would not be good.
It's just inflation and.
Well,
and a contract.
let's not talk about 9.1% inflation. So
So if this project is approved, they'll have 2 apartments then,
Three
3 apartments.
apartments on the second floor.
Speaking of those apartments, I didn't see a discussion here of what they're going to do for parking, because I mean, potentially you've got as many as 8 occupants within those 3 apartment buildings, and feasibly each of those could drive a car. I can't think of much parking in that region. Do you know what the plan is for something like that?
I do not know if there is a plan. That particular project is located in the historic district. Is exempt from on-street parking, so they are not required to submit a parking plan. I would anticipate there may be some market demand for some additional parking, but it's not required as part of this proposal, nor for that property to develop. So there's nothing submitted at this time.
following up on that question, and Timothy, if this might be out of your bailiwick here, but I can't recall if that's 2-hour limited or is it permit parking, or is it 2-hour permit both?
Mr. Mayor, that is out of my bailiwick. I don't have the answer at the moment.
Okay, because I'm just wondering if as Dave says, potentially 8 people. That could be 8 additional cars. That's a lot of extra parking down there already when we have a tight problem.
But there is the parking on Jefferson too, that.
There is,
that
but
they can utilize.
we know how that goes.
I know.
And just to clarify, that's not something that the agency and the URAC should consider in whether or not to approve the funding.
Right.
Because the city has made a decision to not require parking for the downtown buildings. And so that's all that's a good discussion about impacts. It really has no bearing on whether
Whether or not the
the
funding.
project should be funded.
There's one more question. In both of this place, this particular project and another one later on, they're not ADA accessible. Neither one of them, correct?
Correct, not at this time. There is a fair amount of work in here that deals with access issues. But again, at this point, ADA accessibility is not there.
I do believe there is potential for an elevator.
There is,
An elevator in the building, so that might be something that is in the works.
For this one, the other project doesn't,
Right.
isn't.
but is not part of, the elevator is not part of this application.
Any more questions on Golden Camp project? All right, then moving on to Country Financial. So Timothy, just, this is probably a rehash. This is basically, the money for this project is basically to get the second apartment up and functioning.
Correct.
Okay,
So that this project is exclusively Unit B in your application.
Okay.
So it is that last second apartment.
And this project does have parking for the 2 spaces.
Yes, there is parking in there. The application also includes repaving those parking spaces. That also alleviates some drainage issues to prevent ongoing drainage problems with the foundation. But as you had mentioned in your previous comments, again, there was no requirement to cover that parking again because it's exempt from some of those parking regulations.
I had 2 questions.
go ahead.
One was on the drawings that were submitted, there was an indication that windows on this wall are proposed to be filled. And I was just curious from the drawing, if that pertained to the first unit or the second unit. So I was just curious of the status on those. It says windows on this wall are supposed to be filled, subject to landmarks commission. I was just curious if that was the unit that's already been completed, so is that done, or is that pertained to?
You'll have to give me a second to look at the drawing. And which window are we looking at?
So it's you're looking at the drawing, it's the one, the top one on the unit, but they're not labeled A or B, sorry, just.
Okay, so looking at the drawing, if my directions are correct, that is the south facing window. And yes, those are planned to be filled with masonry as part of a requirement for fire and life safety,
Okay.
because they open out onto a parapet which is too close to the roof line of the adjacent building. So, so they're not large enough to be fire escape windows, and they are a fire hazard should there be a fire in the adjacent building. So that was based on the discussion that I had with the property owner. I would be happy to verify that with the building department, but that's my understanding on those 2 windows on that parapet wall.
Awesome, thank you. And then my other question was just for clarification on the beds. A lot of it said that it was, you know, similar to the first unit, but I was just curious how current those bids were. Since some of that work's already been done, and just in terms of the project estimates, recognizing cost of increase, just making sure those were the most current or as close to.
Those are the most current numbers we have with the application.
Timothy, there's a fold-out floor plan in here. Could you help me orient myself in terms of front of the building, back building?
So if you look at this fold out map, here. So if you look at your map, holding it up, proposed construction, this would be the north side. This side where the TVs are would be the Adams Avenue. The bedrooms are off the back alley. This is the entry hall coming off of the back alley, parking in the alley. Adams, this is that parapet wall that Elena was asking about.
Okay, and the photographs that we have of an egress, balcony sort of egress, that would be on the right end of that floor plan.
Correct. That would be that when you come in, that would be that central alley between the central hallway between the two units.
But where's the joint washer and dryer? I know that they said that they have it.
It's right in the middle of your map.
Yeah, where it says
So it says
storage.
storage closet,
Oh, okay.
stackable washer dryer shared between the two units.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see, right there. I was thinking they were sharing it with the apartments next door.
Yeah, it is in the middle of the hall, so it's accessible by both units.
I will chime in, and I know we're not supposed to talk about this, but I do enjoy this project because they have parking. And I'm actually very disappointed that Dr. Clay brought it up before me because I'm the parking guy. Thank you.
I'll fight you for that.
Yeah, well, you've got me this way.
Any more questions on Country Financial? Right, moving on, Evermind. It's not, there's no D on there.
Never mind.
Evermind. I would play with words, never mind, Evermind. It's nice to see that building getting refurbished, repurposed. I'm thrilled at the idea that the owners moved their business from the west side specifically because they wanted to be in this community. And they're doing much more with this building than just refitting it for their business. They're going to have other facilities in there. I think that speaks well to this particular project. Although the funding, remind us, the funding for this part, a funding request is not necessarily for all of the elements they're doing, but primarily for the business end. Is that correct?
So for tonight's discussion, the application is for just the work that is being done for the relocation of the Evermind building or Evermind business. That is predominantly the single story addition that was done in the 1960s. It does include that space all the way through to the outside wall of the multi-story Elks building. So everything that is on that single level is included in this project. So when you look at the floor plan, you will see where the main entry is when you come up that rounded ramp all the way back. That's the new addition, but you'll see there is design space and other administrative space that goes on that same level into the middle of the two-story building. So it is sort of, it's one level, but it's more than just the piece that sticks out on the right.
And I think this was a question that Mary Ann brought up, and it had an element in there about a bookstore.
Yeah, the bookstore, they were,
So the what used to be Sunflower Books?
no, I don't think so. It's part
The
of. the-
bookstore inside the.
So there is a plan, if you read the plan, and if you look at the drawings, when you come up the ramp into the building on Washington Street, in that main entry, you'll go into the lobby where there will be a small bookstore and coffee shop
Okay.
there on
Yeah,
that
that's-
corner space.
It's been a while since I've been in that building. They used to have banquets and the like. You would walk in the main door, there was a bar in there, I guess, and then there was a big banquet area. Am I talking about the right
Yep.
space?
And that'll all be production space now.
Okay,
And I think at a future date, the horseshoe shaped driveway, that will become a patio space for the bookstore and the coffee shop.
okay.
So if that helps with your direction.
Yep, the visualizing of it. Yeah, thank you, Roxy.
So, yeah, I would caution that that patio space is mentioned as a future plan in this particular application, but it is not part of the work that's being applied for. So,
But for directionality purposes, that will help.
And the loading dock is in the back. As I'm facing the building, it's sort of the right rear.
loading dock will be on the right or north end of the building.
And there's.
So they'll access from the alley.
Okay, yep, that's what I was thinking. Or if I'm looking at the schematics right, it looks like they'll be able to come off of Washington back in there.
The driveway will go through to Washington, but for egress time, working with planning and zoning, they'll access the loading dock from the alley where they have sufficient turning radius.
And there is a plan for apartments to be,
So there is in here, in the plan, there is reference to an apartment. For clarification, that is not a residential unit. What they are including in there is a space if they have a visiting designer, if they have a visiting technician who's spending multiple days on site doing installation, doing repair work, that technician or designer can stay on site. So it's more a sort of an executive suite for visiting employee, not a residential unit or Airbnb. Does that help with clarification?
And this says they're bringing folks from Portland and that they're looking for additional staff, but it doesn't say how many additional staff they're hoping to hire from our local community already.
Correct. And so I have had discussions with the project owner. And our best estimate at this point is they're expecting to bring around 4 employees from Portland and probably hiring another 4 to 6 beyond that for a total of between 8 and 10 employees. And that's based on conversations with the property owner, but not reflected in the actual document. Would suspect that's subject to change if business goes great and they need to hire more.
Yeah, that would, yeah.
That's our hope.
Any other questions on Evermind?
No questions. I just wanted to comment that I appreciated the 1914 photo of the original building. I haven't seen that. So, spectacular.
Well, actually, if you look at that, I did have the opportunity to take the tour and speak with the owners. And they're going to restore some of the arched windows and bring back some of the historic aspects of the old portion that was left after the fire.
Wow. I completely missed that photo. There's so much else in here, but that's very different what it looks like now. Any other questions? All right, moving on to front office solutions. I have to tell you, I guess maybe I haven't strolled down that part of Adams in a while. I didn't realize that kettle corn was no longer in there. Is the signs, has anything changed on the front of the building?
No, Cattle Corn and More, I think was one of those businesses that was kind of a casualty of COVID.
Okay.
I know they tried to kind of continue to go and do some work during COVID. They had closed, I think, permanently. My best guess is about 8 months ago. So
Thank you. Any questions on front office?
So the rock that they're taking off is the one from the front, not the side. They're not going to do anything to the side of the building.
the application does actually say they're taking all of that lava rock.
That's what I thought.
So they are hoping to do both the actual storefront and the parking street frontage, remove the lava stone and replace with a brick facade.
Because that's what we wanted. It happened once before with another occupant there. We thought they were gonna do that, but they didn't. So they're taking over the office. They're gonna take over Kettle Corn's, where Kettle Corn was, the front part there.
Correct. So Front Office Solutions actually is the tenant for the rest of that building. They had leased that small space in the front to Kettle Corn and more. And they have expanded into that space. And so now they will be the primary and only tenant on that ground floor.
Are they still utilizing the basement too then for their services?
I believe they are utilizing the whole space, but I do not know for certain.
We have a sense of what the new awning is going to look like. That's going to be more of a historic appearance.
That project would have to go through landmarks review. So you would have to comply with design standards. And so I don't know, I haven't seen the plan for the actual awning yet. So I do know in conversations with the property owner that they are not wanting to replace that with a plastic awning again.
Additional questions? Could change the whole look and feel of that building when they, and the storefront. I'm trying now to think, since this is some facade elements, hypothetically, if they didn't receive enough money or they didn't get any grant funding for this project, would they be eligible for facade renovation? Or is it too late in the offing?
So they cannot combine the two at the same time. So, they could potentially, if they were not funded, come back. But in the application, they do stipulate that at this point, their priority is really the structural repair and the roof repair, which was really the catalyst for this investment, was to do some immediate repair and then to be able to leverage that investment to do some desired improvements. It does indicate that at this point, without the funding, those exterior improvements would be put on hold and prioritized as funding was available.
Any more questions on front office? All right, moving on, smokehouse. Personally, it's nice to see some of our efforts going to that end of Adams. Like most of our stuff happens down here in the central business zone, with the exception of the local and across the street. So the landing. So it's nice to see something down there. And it certainly is a visible element when people come into town.
And this project is right across the street from the Travel Lodge, which received funding last year as well.
Questions?
I noticed, did they start their project already? It looked today like they had new blacktop on their driveway.
Yes, they they did submit an early request application when they had a rather short notice contractor availability.
Okay.
And didn't want to risk losing a contractor for 3 more months. So they did submit it and moved forward with that project after submitting the start early request.
So just as a reminder, the Smokehouse Restaurant has operated for 40+ years, but there's new ownership, which is about 2 years old.
Correct.
And that sort of coincides with, as I've watched some things happening there. I remember, signs seem to change, and there are a few other things, menus are changing. And so I'm assuming that the new owners are slowly implementing some of those changes.
Correct.
Operations. Okay. Questions? Last but not least, the local kitchen.
So,
Another project that's at that end,
Mhm.
east end of Adams, one block over, but nice to see some stuff happening down that end.
Can I
Specific
assume-
question?
Can I assume that they couldn't do this in the landings kitchen?
so no, the landing kitchen was, does not have the capacity or the space that they would need for full production, walk-in coolers, storage. So yeah, so the purpose outlined in the application really is that the production capacity they need does not fit in either the local or the landing facility. So there is a need for a new space for that production.
I didn't notice in here how big a cooler, but I'm assuming it's going to be fairly large if they're going to store ice cream and other fruits or other food. I see one space that's sort of blocked off on the diagram on the bottom side. That may be the cooler that they're planning on putting in.
So I am not sure, it is not labeled here. There's a, so the drawing does not label that as specifically a cooler. It would, my assumption is that would be the walk-in cooler.
I think it is labeled where you have the EV, in writing, it's labeled block.
There it is labeled in the rendering on the previous page. Thank you. See?
Other questions on this one?
The only other thing I was going to ask is the door that they want to replace the garage door with, what type of, is it just like a one entry door, not a huge door like the garage door is currently?
I do not have the details for that.
I'm guessing, Marianne, that in order to transport the product over to the old Texaco station, there's an existing like roll-up garage door. And I would assume what they'll do is back into that, load their product and take it over.
Well, I kind of would think so too. I just, because every time. That's what it looks like now.
We've got this page showing.
The only thing that bothered me was the fact that it's, I guess it was sanitation around that area. It just doesn't look like a place that you'd want to have all white and ice cream and I'm sorry, but it doesn't. So I was just wondering what kind of a door they were going to put on there because it's,
There's a rendering on
yeah, right there.
because the one actually saying.
Yeah, roll up door.
I have a clarification question that I'm not sure if you know the answer to, Kennedy, but on the business plan template, when it was referring to a 12-month cash flow projection, the first item mentioned a community kitchen entrepreneur space, but I didn't see any narrative really around that. Do you know, just some conversations, is that kind of a secondary use of the space or know any more? Because that does, I mean, makes up a portion of, you know, projected income, so.
I know there has been some discussion about that, but the primary purpose and the purpose outlined in the application really is to be able to produce product to service their two existing businesses, predominantly the local.
Well, Alana, I had the same sort of thought when they said a commercial kitchen because it would, I think that it'd be nice to have something like that locally for people that are making their own products, jams, relishes, those types of things that they turn around and then sell. Because you can't make that stuff in your kitchen and then sell it. So having rental for that might be interesting to see if that's where they go with it eventually. But in terms of our thoughts and evaluation, this development is primarily to support the local for ice cream and other elements.
And that's the way it's described in this application. And I think for URAC and the agency, the scoring is really based on the merits of the physical project and less in the weeds on the intended use.
Just another comment on the doors. From looking at the budget, there is no cost allocated to replacing the doors, so it appears they're going to reuse the existing doors.
Other questions?
Yes, I have a concern. Has the health inspector been notified? Offsite.
I have no
offsite
idea.
Cooking is, needs to be inspected by the health inspector.
If approved and the project goes forward, he does have to go through all of the permitting and other site review processes. So that would be part of that process for a commercial kitchen.
That would take place before the funding would be distributed. That's part of the requirements, or?
The
how's that work?
funding is done on a reimbursement basis after it's expended. So it would be done prior probably to the permitting, so that, you know, he would have a permit to build what he wants there according to those guidelines. And certainly there would be an inspection before a certificate of occupancy. So there would be a pre-construction and a pre-occupancy inspection.
Yeah, it would make sense that we would make the funding contingent upon them actually being able to.
Oh, I'm sorry. Were you finished? I didn't mean to interrupt you. I guess I was thinking that it was only one bay, but they're talking about the whole entire unit, aren't they?
They're talking about one bay. So just the south bay.
The one with the door open here? I mean, because that looks like it's the whole unit of. I see that says local, but then here's the door and I. That looks like this. So I was confused.
So Marianne, on that rendering sketch that you've got, I think what they're talking about
Just
is
that first door.
is that
That
bay, is that door on the left?
Okay, because if you look down here, yeah, because here's all of them, so I wasn't sure. Because what is this piece then that is out?
I thought they said something about having you could walk up and get some stuff out of there.
Okay,
I don't know.
I'm confused with that, I guess.
I am looking for the rendering in question.
It's right at the end of the photographs, the actual photographs.
Yeah.
And just before the rendering of the kitchen area.
Yeah, so if you look at this photograph, so the bay with the truck in it with the new sign that says
Right, the local.
local, that bay, which extends over to where this new addition is, that is the scope of the project. And if you look at the renderings, that'll give you the measurements. So this other bay will continue to operate as a storage bay for the
Okay.
construction company, the one with the doors that are open.
So then this new addition thing is not part of their design.
It is shown in the rendering, and there is reference to new office space. So I assume that is what they're referencing, is new office space.
That's the freezer.
And there's the garage door.
And this is, I think this is.
Yeah, that's the third item on there.
That's my guess. No, I think the truck.
So the only thing I see is office space. Yeah, that I need. description of
Gotcha.
project.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's gonna be an issue. So my guess is that. That's this door. That's this. Kitchen is inside there. It didn't come out, it doesn't come out that far. This doesn't. Sorry, we're looking at,
I think we're just trying to figure out where does this loading bay come in? I mean, again, I'm just curious, you've got a truck that's going in, you've got a garage door open.
Yeah.
And the
that
kitchen
coming
is
in
right
the
there.
Kitchen,
it's kind of,
or do they have this separated somehow? Because I can see that being a major permitting issue if you've got a truck driving in there to deliver things in and out.
So I think you're looking at a rendering that has a door open, because that is the door to the garage door to the right
Uh-huh.
is not changing use. It is an existing warehouse storage for the construction company. It is going to be the neighboring business, basically.
Yeah, it's this bay door to the left though that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
Because I don't see where that fits in on this drawing. And
With the door, Dave, is that what you're talking about?
that's
Dave?
what I'm talking about.
Yeah, with the door is.
I mean, and this may not be a big issue. I mean, how they have this laid out, I'm sure they've thought of this, but I want to be clear that the funding is going to be contingent upon them actually being able to use this space for what it's intended.
Well, Dave, wouldn't the door be here? Right down here on that drawing?
that could be where it is, yeah.
And so just to clarify, for all of the projects, one of the requirements is that they receive all of the permitting and that they have a certificate of occupancy before they receive final payment.
Okay, yeah, thanks for clarifying.
Robert, one question. As they go through the renovation, don't you reimburse as they give you?
They can get one progress payment depending upon the size of the project award.
Okay, and if you gave them that progress payment, would you take it back? If they weren't, if the health department or whatever?
Yeah,
I think that's what we're concerned.
Yeah, if we got into a situation and we have not had it occur where they just didn't get it done, we would just have to deal with that. You know, if you have an incomplete project, you either give them additional time, which we've done with at least one project that comes to mind. But I think we've tightened up substantially the agreement and the timelines and so, yeah, they would have to repay it. And we have a provision that allows us to place it on the property if necessary.
Okay, other than in the weeds questions?
I had one question.
Sure.
And I think I know the answer, but I want to clarify it. Under the cost estimate breakdown, the contingency that follows upgrade electrical and design work, assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, that is just the fluctuation of costs and materials since it was originally estimated. Am I right?
I would assume that is what contingency is. There is an expectation that you're renovating an old building. There may be unexpected costs, there may be inflationary costs, there may be supply chain shortages that drive costs.
Permits go up, yeah. Okay,
And I think Gus probably knows this better than most of us.
I would agree.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right, so that, if hearing none, we've been through each of the projects, we've had a summary. We've been able to ask some questions, clarify some questions. The next step is,
Well, the next step is to give the commission a chance to, and the agency, a chance to have any further discussion you want. You'll take a break, cast your additional points, award your additional points. Remember that you are able to award up to 40 additional points at your discretion per project. Once you have done that and given your updated scores to the agency manager. We can reconvene and there's an agency action form to move forward with,
Okay.
to vote. So in my closing comment for this section, I want to thank you all. I know that this was a substantial document to go through in advance. I am excited that for my first time to go through the urban renewal call for projects. I feel like we got a good set of projects. I'm pretty happy with both the quantity and the quality of projects. And I appreciate the agency and the commission taking the time to do such a thorough job preparing for this evening's meeting. So thank you.
So before we take a break, people want to talk about this, any of these projects at all in general?
I just had one more about Country Financial. Item H in his business plan says that they have hired a property manager, and is that manager already being paid for by the insurance business? Because then down in item I, it shows property management is only $2,640 per year. And that is not a wage for a job unless it's incredibly part-time.
I do not have the answer to that question.
I can clarify quickly about family wage jobs, because I asked Timothy the same question. It's about $45,000 a year, $21.81 an hour.
45,000 a year for a family wage job.
Yes.
Okay. That's something.
Yeah, yes, Mayor, is this the time now we talk about crunching numbers?
In what's the context? Help me
Oh,
out.
just, we have $350,000 and the asks are $399,000, which gives us a deficit of $49,453.
Yeah, I can,
So-
I can cover that.
I don't want to steal your thunder.
Yeah, let me kind of talk about what's going to happen next. Each member of the URAC and the agency has a scoring sheet. Please put your name on the top of that and award the discretionary points. What I will do when you give those to me is I will then go in and enter your individual scores for each of these projects. The way that the policy is structured, the intent is to fully fund the top ranked project first and continue to go down until you reach the budget. In this particular case, we have more asks than dollars. And so once I have those numbers in, I will put them together and then I'll show the scoring, and you'll see where if the agency and URAC vote on approving the projects as funded, you'll see exactly what each project will get and what that cut line is. And from having done some math in advance, I can tell you that there will be, in all likelihood, one project that is not funded, one project that is partially funded based on the dollars that have been asked for. That answer your question?
Yes, it does. I was just wondering, is that the only way?
The intent of the policy is to fully fund the top projects first. The desire to, on the agency's part, to get away from what was referred to at one time as the horse trading or trying to give a little bit to everyone. The intent specifically was, let's fund the best projects first as determined by the collective agency in URAC.
You know what, Matt? I'm not sure I want to get into horse trading with you.
That's why we have the policy.
Yes. All right.
I have a question as a new member. How much, if any, consideration do we give to whether a project can continue without funding, our funding?
There is I think there's always, I think we specifically asked that question and we, of the grant applicants to get an idea of what are they going to do if they don't get the money. Some of those responses are in here. Timothy did mention, for instance, front office solutions. If they don't get funded, they're not going to do any of the exterior stuff. They've got some structural things they got to work on. So my gut feeling is the answers are there. probably shouldn't take that into account. It gets into that. I think that was one of the elements that we had when we were to the bargaining and talking about, okay, you a little bit here, a little bit there. Can we get somebody to actually start this project if we gave them this much? And then it became, well, that's not enough to get me going. So you can consider it, but I would look at the answers that you were given, or that may or may not be in the packet information. Good question.
Mayor, if I could amplify,
Sure.
two other elements. One is completely up to you how to take that overall 40 points for each project and allocate. So in their application, they were asked what would happen if your project isn't funded. So that's certainly something that you could consider when you determine, do I give this project all 40? Do I give this one 30? The other thing, the policy specifically says not to consider whether or not a project has already started, that all of them are considered as if they have done nothing. So they're all going on equal footing. But how you individually decide to award those 40 points is solely up to you as an individual.
Anything else? Good questions. Thanks for asking that clarification.
I just have a final clarification question, and it regards the local application. The very last page in the packet references a Schedule B, which references a flat fee, but that number is larger than the scope of work. And so I was just curious, do you have any indication on what the difference in that Schedule B project budget is versus the project scope of work?
You know.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? All right, so at this time, I'd encourage you to take a few moments. We're gonna break until Robert has all the information. But during that break, consider each project, you have 40 points of discretion, up to 40 points of discretionary that amount to give. This is however you want to do it, however you want to allocate points. The other stuff is pretty concrete, but this is a little more flexible. So once you've got that done, put your name on the paper, put the numbers down, hand them to the district manager, and take a little walk, and we'll come back, let's say, I don't know, 15 minutes. Okay, we're gonna reconvene this joint session of the Urban Renewal Agency and the Urban Renewal Advisory Commission. And we're gonna see some results. We'll have some discussion if we need to. And then we're all gonna vote on the rankings that we're presented with. I would ask you to turn to the AAF tab in your folder, which is Agency Action Form. We have this, when we do councils, it's a CAF, so it's a council action form. But since we're an agency. And with that, I'll turn it over to Agency Manager Strope, and he can walk us through what he found.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And again, I want to thank the agency and the URAC for reading through all of this material. It's quite a bit to go through. So what you see here are, for each of the project, are the staff scores in green. And that represents those portions of the application that are specific to things like location, type of project. There's no discretion whatsoever in assigning those points. And I don't know why that TV keeps doing that. And then the blue is what the URAC and the agency awarded. That's probably why it's doing that. And you can see the overall point allocation. And in the far right is the ranking of the projects. As I kind of indicated, 5 of the 6 were above the cut line for funding. The smokehouse, the 5th ranked project came in about $380-ish below what their request and eligible amount was. And so on the agency action form, it talks about a motion to approve the funding as discussed, which would be to fund those 5 projects in the amount reflected. And the way that the agency action form is structured, there is an opportunity before that motion is made for any final discussion. So Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you unless anybody has any questions for me.
So we have the scoring. Per policy, the money is allocated for each project into the amount that they requested until we run out of the funds that we have. So any conversation, any discussion, comments by the URAC?
I was really shocked about the Country Financial, actually,
Me too.
because during the agency, 17, 22, 28, but the staff scored them a lot lower. I really thought they'd be in there, but that's just me.
Anybody else?
I just have a question.
Sure.
When they are notified of these results, do we encourage them to apply again in the future?
Timothy or Robert?
So it kind of depends on the project. So for a project that's already constructed, they don't have the opportunity to apply again. And in some cases, there may be a project that could qualify for a facade grant, as an example. And I'm speaking globally for this program. So we have had situations in the past where projects have not been funded and they've been able to access a facade grant to do a portion of a project. In some cases, they don't have the ability to do the projects without the funding, and they can always reapply if they haven't done it.
Any other questions or discussion?
And I would be remiss if I didn't clarify, when we say staff scoring, it's not the staff making a determination of how many points they should get. It's the staff applying the specific location under the policy. So, the policy for each of those items identifies, is it in the central business zone? Is it a retail? And if it's so, then it's this many points. If it is of this many dollars of private investment versus public, it's this many points. So there really is no discretion on the part of the staff for those first 4 allocations.
John?
Is there a possibility of doing a supplemental budget for the Urban Renewal Agency and adding that additional money to that call for projects so that every item is funded fully?
It wouldn't require a supplemental budget, but the agency would have to ask that this be put on an agenda to take dollars from another line in the budget to do that.
So we have a contingency fund in the budget though, in the urban renewal budget. And I'm sure, what are we looking at? $29,000-$30,000 difference or something like that. I'm sure we could find that in the urban renewal budget, I would think.
My suggestion would be to bring that up as an agency at the August meeting.
Sure.
Is it possible, Ra, I know there are no business projects and there was an amount allocated to the business park. Can that be brought back into the call for projects to fund it fully?
The intent is to keep the business park funds separated into that and to roll them over into the next year. So if the dollars weren't allocated and were pulled from the business park allocation into this, then that would essentially take away from next year's allocation, because we've been growing that fund each year.
And it has never been used.
The business park absolutely
Oh
has.
no, the $200,000.
That's not, she was talking about the business
Okay,
park
but
call
there
for
is to
projects,
it.
were you not?
This year's?
Yeah.
There were no applicants.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So very, I don't want to get too far down this road, so stop me if you need to. John brought up an item about increasing the 350 to 383. Let's just round it to 384. We would, and if that was brought up at the August meeting, we wouldn't act on it then. We would have to wait till September.
Yeah, my recommendation would be, because of the process that we follow to allocate these dollars, the budget committee, I think that if the agency wants to do that, asking to bring that forward as an agenda item in September, we would do that, and then you could make a decision as to what you wanted to do.
Okay. If I would encourage you all to be attentive to what happens at the August meeting. And should this come up to vote in September, I'd really like you to be there, or at least to give us input on how you're feeling about that. Okay? That's part of what I'm in, what you're gonna be doing, is giving us that kind of feedback.
If we put it on the agenda, we'll make sure you get a copy of the agenda.
All right, other,
That'll be on August agenda.
If the agency wants to broach that in August as a September action item, then that's the process we'll
Okay,
follow.
thank you.
We can't put it on the agenda right now.
I would suggest that we don't, because the intent of this is to consider these funding things, and because of transparency, I
Okay.
think it would be better to do that. And it's not going to have any impact on the projects, quite frankly, they're up there because Country Financial is under construction now. So it's just, it would be a timing of when those dollars would be made available if the agency were to place that on the agenda and then act that fashion.
Okay.
Matt, I thought I saw you picking up your mic. You good? Okay. Anyone else? Question? All right, before I call for motion, I just want to remind you that all of you are voting as well. So the URAC will vote when we come down to this. I'm just going to ask for a hand raise or an aye rather than a roll call vote. And the agency will be voting as well. All right, so with that, I'll ask for a motion on this.
I move approval of the funding for the call for projects in the amounts as discussed. As discussed, I guess.
Second.
All right, any questions and comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay.
Thank you.
We've done it. All right.
Nice job.
that's it for the evening. Thank you all. Pay attention to what's going on because we may ask you for input later on in September on the rest of the project. So with that, we're adjourned.